A was Rebecca's 45th birthday, and I stood on her doorstep clutching a cake I had ordered from her favorite bakery, chocolate with strawberries, just like she loved as a child. It had cost me $200, but for my only daughter, nothing had ever been too expensive. I knocked with a smile that felt like it might split me open. I expected the bright face I had known for years, the one that used to run into my arms shouting, "Mom!" Instead, the door opened and I met an expression of flat annoyance. "Oh, it's you," Rebecca muttered without once looking me in the eye. The warmth I had imagined evaporated before it had a chance to appear. "Happy birthday, my love," I said, holding out the cake with the candles already in place. "I brought your favorite." She sighed as if the gesture were a burden I had no right to carry. "Mom, we need to talk," she said, letting me in with the same icy detachment she had worn for months. We sat in the living room of the beautiful house I had financed when she and David married. The $50,000 I had taken from my life savings, money earned penny by penny after 40 years of double shifts as a nurse. I told myself I'd done it for love. I told myself it would come back in hugs and kindness. That day, kindness did not come. "You know, Mom," Rebecca began in the cold voice that had become her armor, "I've been thinking about presents, about what would actually make me happy." I nodded, eager, hopeful. "Tell me, a trip? Jewelry? A car?" I offered, voice trembling with anticipation. Her eyes met mine, and the look in them was not disappointment but contempt, the kind that stung the soul. "The one thing I'd love most as a birthday present," she said slowly, savoring each syllable, "is for you to just die." Her words struck like a physical blow. I felt my heart rip, as if someone had pulled it from my chest. My own daughter, the child I had carried for 9 months, the little girl I'd kissed and clothed and fought for, had asked for my death as a gift. "What did you just say?" I managed, the world dissolving into a loop of those words. "You heard me," she replied, cold and precise. "I'm tired of you, Mom, tired of the calls, the unannounced visits, of you always being here, bothering me. My life would be easier if you disappeared." My hands shook. 72 years of living, 45 of them spent loving Rebecca, and never had I imagined this. "I'm your mother," I sobbed. "I've given you everything. I've sacrificed everything for you." She stood and cut me off with a laugh sharp as glass. "Exactly. That's why you're suffocating me. I can't breathe with your constant presence. Go get a life of your own and leave me alone." The cake melted in my hands like my hopes for that day. Candles dripped wax the way my tears dripped from cheeks that had known only one task, to love. I left her house holding the cake like a mocking trophy and closed the door behind me. I did not know then that I would never cross that threshold again as the woman who had sacrificed everything. At my small apartment, the cake went into the trash and the melted candles became mirrors for the tears that would not stop falling. I sank onto the same old sofa where I had nursed Rebecca, where I had read her bedtime stories and cheered at her first steps. How had I reached a point where my daughter wished me dead? I began to catalog the life I had given her, triple shifts and sold heirlooms to pay for $1,100 antibiotics when she had pneumonia at 3, weekend work for months to afford the $800 prom dress that made her eyes sparkle, $42,000 for college, financed by a second mortgage because education mattered most, $35,000 for a wedding so she could have the dream night, $150,000 as a down payment for the house she and David wanted, money I had been saving for my retirement. When David lost his job last year, who paid 8 months of mortgage? Me. $16,000 from my pension. Braces for the twins? $4,000. Gifts and holidays across 45 years? Easily another $10,000. I kept boxes of receipts as proof not of distrust, but pride, proof of everything I had done for my family. Adding it all up felt like watching a lifetime evaporate. Nearly $500,000, invested in one conclusion, that my daughter's happiest gift would be my absence. That night, I called Rebecca because I needed to hear her voice and make sure I hadn't misheard. "What do you want now, Mom?" she snapped after the fifth ring. When I asked if she truly meant those words, she said, "Of course I meant it. I need space. Your obsession with me isn't healthy." "Obsession?" I echoed, incredulous. "You call a mother's love obsession?" "Yes," she answered, "and I hope after today you get the message." There was no misunderstanding. She meant every cruel thing she had said. I lay awake for hours, eyes fixed on the ceiling while memories tumbled through me. Every hug, every "I love you, Mom," every small triumph I'd celebrated on her behalf. At 3 in the morning, the grief hardened into something else. Anger, yes, but not the bitter kind that ruins you. This was a clear, cold determination. If she wanted me to disappear from her life, I would do it, but on my own terms, not erased by death, not diminished by shame, but vanished into a life I could call my own. The next day, I dressed with purpose. My first stop was the bank, where a joint account existed for Rebecca's house emergencies. $20,000 sat there. "Good morning, Mrs. Johnson," greeted Mr. Martinez. "How can I help you today?" "I want to close joint account number 4587281, I said with a smile that was not kindness, but quiet resolution. "Transfer everything to my personal account." He warned me of the balance. "Completely sure," I replied, and signed the paper with hands that no longer shook. Seeing those $20,000 returned to me felt like the first reclaiming of a life I'd given away. It was only the start. At the mortgage office, Miss Williams explained the rights attached to the co-signer status I had accepted years ago out of love, responsibility if they defaulted, but also legal rights to reclaim the property if the primary holders lacked stability. The fact that David had just lost his job again, information Rebecca had casually provided weeks earlier, was a weapon I never intended to wield, but here it lay in plain sight. From there, I went to meet my old friend and lawyer, Anil Adams. "Julietta," he said, surprised, "has something happened with Rebecca?" I told him everything, the humiliating words, the casual cruelty. He listened, his face folding into concern. "Change your will," I told him. "Everything that would have gone to Rebecca, life insurance, savings, property, go to the Orphans Foundation. Set up a trust for the grandchildren, but make it inaccessible to Rebecca until they are 25. He nodded, and then I asked the question that had lodged itself in my chest like a stone. "Prepare the documents to reclaim the house. I'm the co-signer. I want my rights enforced." Anil's eyes brightened with understanding. "Are you sure you want to go this far?" "Completely sure," I replied. That evening, walking home beneath a sky washed in gold and shadow, I felt for the first time in years a strange lightness. I poured a glass of wine and called a travel agency I had bookmarked months earlier. "Switzerland," I told the agent. "Send me every detail about starting over at my age." The world seemed to widen around me. For decades, I had lived for Rebecca. Now, at 72, I was learning to live for myself, and the lesson felt like an awakening. For the next few days, I moved like a woman waking from a long sleep, fragile, bruised, but strangely aware of a strength I hadn't felt in decades. Every morning, I reminded myself, Rebecca had wished for my death, not metaphorically, not in anger, but in the coldest, clearest voice a daughter could use. And each time I replayed those words, the sting sharpened into resolve. If she wanted me gone, then disappearing was exactly what I would give her, but not in the way she imagined. On Wednesday morning, as sunlight spilled through my kitchen window, my phone rang with Rebecca's name flashing on the screen. My heart leapt foolishly, hoping she would apologize, even slightly, even accidentally, but I should have known better by then. "Mom," she said without a greeting, "I need you to do me a favor." A favor? After telling me she wanted me dead? "What do you need?" I asked, bracing myself. "The twins have a school presentation on Friday, and David and I have an important work dinner. Can you watch them?" I almost laughed. The irony was bitter, almost theatrical. The same woman who wished for my death was now demanding my services like I was a live-in nanny she had purchased. "I can't," I said simply. Her shock was immediate. "What do you mean you can't?" "I have other plans," I answered, allowing myself a tiny smile. "What plans could you possibly have?" she asked, her voice dripping with condescension, the same tone she used whenever she wanted to remind me of my age, my supposed helplessness. "Plans that are none of your business," I said. "Find another sitter." Her silence cracked into disbelief. Then came the emotional guilt weapon she had used for years. "Since when do you charge me to watch your own grandchildren?" There it was, the emotional manipulation she relied on, like oxygen. "Since the day you wished for my death," I replied coldly. "If you want me to disappear from your life, I'm starting now." A heavy pause followed. Then a sarcastic laugh. "Seriously? You're going to punish me like this? Like a child throwing a tantrum?" "It's not punishment," I said. "It's respect for your wish." "Fine then," she snapped. "Go ahead. Be childish, but don't come crying when you're lonely." And she hung up. But the only thing I felt was clarity. A calm, enormous clarity that filled my chest like breath after being underwater too long. That afternoon, I walked into the bank and withdrew $30,000 in cash. Money for my new life, the life that belonged to me at last. I placed it in an envelope and locked it in my safe. For the first time in years, money in my hands felt like freedom rather than obligation. Then, I called the travel agency. "My trip to Zurich? I'm confirming it for next Tuesday." The agent processed my request happily, and I paid the $5,000 initial cost without hesitation. For decades, every dollar I spent had been weighed against Rebecca's needs. Not anymore. On Thursday morning, I received a gentle knock on my door. It was my neighbor Elvira, a kind woman who had witnessed far too many moments where I ran to Rebecca's house like a desperate servant. "Julieta," she said, her voice full of concern, "you look different. What happened?" I invited her in and told her everything. Every cruel word, every ungrateful act, every sacrifice I had made for Rebecca across 45 years that had been rewarded with coldness so sharp it still burned in my chest. As I spoke, Elvira's eyes glistened with disbelief and anger on my behalf. "My God, Julieta, how could she say something like that after everything you've done?" She reached for my hand, squeezing it with warmth no one else had given me in months, and then gently, she asked the question that would change everything. "What are you going to do now?" I took a breath. "I'm leaving. I'm moving to Switzerland." Her eyes widened, not with shock, but admiration. "Good, good. You deserve a life, Julieta." But I said, softly, leaning closer, "I need your help with something important." And there, in my dimly lit living room, I explained my plan. Not a plan of revenge, but a plan of rebirth. Rebecca wanted me gone. Fine. She would believe I was gone. Completely. For a while at least. Elvira listened carefully, then broke into a slow, wicked smile. "I'll help you. Gladly. Maybe this is exactly what she needs." That night, I began writing the most important letter of my life. A letter Rebecca would find after my disappearance. A letter that revealed every sacrifice I had ever made, every dollar I had spent, every moment I had given her at the cost of my own life. Not a hateful letter, but a painfully honest one. My dear Rebecca, you wished for me to disappear from your life, and so I am granting your wish. I wrote until my fingers ached, 23 pages of truth, the truth she had refused to see. I attached copies of the updated will, the canceled insurance, the mortgage rights I intended to exercise, and every legal shift that meant she would no longer be financially sheltered by the mother she rejected. Your life will be easier without me, I wrote, but it will also be much more expensive. On Saturday, as I finished packing my 2 suitcases, Rebecca called me 3 times. I didn't answer. Her ignorance of the cliff opening under her feet didn't concern me anymore. The next day, David appeared at my door looking desperate. "Julieta," she said, "Rebecca told me everything. Please don't do this to our family." "Do what?" I asked calmly. "Stop helping us. The kids need you. We need you." How fascinating. I was a nuisance on Friday, a burden on Saturday, and on Sunday suddenly I was necessary. Your wife was clear. She wants me gone. I'm simply respecting her wishes. But she didn't mean it, he insisted helplessly. Oh, she meant every word, I replied slowly, closing the door. Give my grandchildren a kiss for me. That night, I lay awake, not broken, not sad, but filled with anticipation I hadn't felt in years. At 72, I was about to begin an adventure, a brand new life that belonged only to me. And the first step of that rebirth would begin at dawn. The next morning arrived with a kind of quiet electricity humming inside me. At 5 a.m., when the sky was still a deep shade of sleeping blue, Elvira knocked gently on my door. She stepped in, holding a cup of fresh coffee, her warm smile giving me strength I didn't know I would need. For years, I had moved through life numb, a servant to my daughter's expectations, but now every moment felt sharper, clearer, as though my soul had been washed and reawakened. "Ready for your great escape?" she whispered playfully. "More than ready," I replied, surprising both of us with how steady my voice sounded. I picked up the 2 suitcases that held what remained of my old life, just the essentials. Everything else, the emotional chains, the unspoken guilt, the decades of self-sacrifice, I was finally leaving behind. Before we walked out, I handed Elvira the spare keys to my apartment and the thick envelope containing the 23-page letter for Rebecca, along with all the legal documents that would shake her world. We had rehearsed the plan so carefully, it almost felt theatrical. "You'll go to her on Wednesday," I reminded her softly. "Tell her I haven't answered the phone. Tell her you used the spare keys in fear something happened, and that you found the apartment empty. Then give her the letter." She nodded with a mischievous glint. "Don't worry, Julieta. I taught drama for 30 years. This will be my masterpiece." Her confidence soothed the small ache in my chest, the ache any mother would feel when leaving behind a daughter she once loved more than life itself. But wounds have their limits. Mine had finally reached theirs. When the taxi arrived at exactly 6 a.m., something inside me shifted. I took one last look at my small apartment, the space that had held my joys, my heartbreaks, my quiet years. Yet I felt no nostalgia. Instead, I felt like I was walking away from a cage I never realized I had built with my own hands. "To the airport?" the driver asked. "Yes," I said. And those 2 words felt like the beginning of a new life. During the drive, I thought of all the mornings I had rushed to Rebecca's home, answering her calls instantly, like a dog trained to run at the sound of its master. I remembered missing holidays, canceling plans, spending every extra dollar on her needs. I had lived for her approval, her temporary affection, her rare moments of softness.
But today, for the first time in decades, I was living for myself. At the airport, while I waited for my flight, my phone buzzed repeatedly. Rebecca again, 3 calls, then a message. "Mom, this is ridiculous. Call me. The kids are asking about you." I stared at the words, but they barely stirred anything inside me anymore. I deleted the message without replying, feeling a strange power settle into my bones. The flight to Zurich took 12 long hours, but it was the most peaceful journey of my life. No one knew where I was. No one could reach me with demands. No one could guilt me into sacrifice. For the first time, silence was not loneliness. It was freedom. Somewhere over the ocean, I opened my journal and wrote everything I felt. The pain, the fear, the liberation. I wanted to remember the exact moment when I finally reclaimed my dignity, in case I ever forgot what it cost me. When I arrived in Zurich, a man from the travel agency waited with a sign. Mrs. Julieta Johnson. A strange warmth rose inside me. After years of being called Mom only when convenient, it felt grounding to be addressed as a person again. His name was Klaus, a young man with kind eyes. He said, "Welcome to Switzerland. I hope you're ready for a new adventure." "I am," I replied, and for the first time since I left home, I truly meant it. He drove me to a charming furnished apartment in the heart of Zurich. A single lamp warmed the living room with golden light, and from the window, I could see a quiet park and a sliver of the lake shimmering like glass. He explained that this would be my home for the first month. "Take your time deciding if you wish to stay permanently. Switzerland welcomes you." That night, I slept deeply, wrapped in silence and safety. No calls, no demands, no guilt. The next morning, I explored the city, the cobblestone streets, the flower shops, the cafes smelling of butter and fresh bread. I bought myself a bouquet of white lilies for no reason other than their beauty. Then, I purchased a silk scarf, soft, elegant, expensive, a gift to myself. As I walked by the lake, watching sailboats glide through the crystal water, I wondered how many luxurious moments I had denied myself while feeding Rebecca's endless needs. 50,000 here, 10,000 there, years of unpaid babysitting, emergency funds, mortgage payments, tuition, gifts, an entire life poured into someone who responded by wishing for my death. Around 2 p.m. Zurich time, I glanced at the clock and realized it was 8 a.m. back home. Elvira was preparing to set the plan into motion. By 5 p.m., my phone finally vibrated in my purse. Rebecca. I let it ring. She called again and again. By the 7th call, I answered. "Mom!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "Where are you? What is happening? Elvira came to the house and said you disappeared. What is going on?" I gazed at the peaceful Swiss lake as her panic poured into my ear. "Hello, Rebecca," I said calmly. "Did you read the letter yet?" "Yes, I read the letter. Are you out of your mind? How could you do this? How could you leave? Where are you?" "I'm exactly where I need to be," I replied softly. "Far away from you, just like you wanted." "I didn't want this. I didn't want you to actually leave." Her voice shook, fear, confusion, desperation blending together. "You told me your greatest birthday wish was for me to die," I reminded her. "You were very clear." "I didn't mean it. I was stressed, angry. You know how things are. I said it in the moment." "No, you said the truth in the moment." Tears filled her voice. "Mom, please come back. The kids miss you. I miss you. We need you. Do you miss me? I asked quietly. Or do you miss the money, the babysitting, the free support, the security? Silence. A silence that said everything. Before she could respond, I ended the call, blocked her number, blocked David's as well, and placed the phone face down on the table. For the first time, my heart didn't break. It rested. A full, quiet rest I had needed for years.
There was something strangely peaceful about waking up in a place where no one expected anything from me. No phone buzzing with demands, no guilt waiting on the other side of the door, just soft morning light pouring through the Zurich windows and the quiet realization that the world was moving on, and so was I. But peace is a fragile thing, especially when you've lived your whole life inside someone else's storm. By Thursday afternoon, a knock came at my temporary apartment door. Standing on the other side was Elvira, her face flushed with excitement, her breath short like she had been rushing. "Julieta," she said, stepping inside quickly. "Everything is unfolding exactly as planned, and better than either of us imagined." She sat down, eyes bright with the kind of energy that only dramatic news can spark. "Rebecca is falling apart." A quiet ache moved through my chest, not out of guilt, but out of recognition. I knew this day would come, the day my daughter finally understood what it meant to lose access to everything I had quietly held together for decades. "What happened?" I asked softly. "She went to your apartment," Elvira said. "She found it empty. She found the letter. Julieta, she screamed. She cried. She kept saying, she wouldn't just leave me. She wouldn't leave me like this." She wasn't thinking of you, of course. It was the money, the house, the benefits, everything. A bitter truth settled in my bones, but I didn't let it shake me. "She wanted her life without me," I said calmly. "Now she has it." Elvira reached out and squeezed my hand. "She deserves the consequences. You deserve your freedom." That night, I made dinner for myself, something simple and comforting, and as I sat by the window watching the city lights shimmer against the lake, the silence inside me felt less like emptiness and more like healing. But calm rarely lasts long when someone like Rebecca is losing control. By Friday morning, my phone lit up again with messages, but these were very different from before. They weren't desperate, they were panicked. "The bank called us. Mom, please. The lawyer said you can reclaim the house. David doesn't have a job yet. We can't afford this. Please, just call me." Every word pulled at the last threads of her false confidence. For years, she had believed my sacrifices were guaranteed. Now she was learning what life looked like when the safety net walked away. I didn't respond. Instead, I walked out into Zurich's cold morning air and treated myself to breakfast at a cafe overlooking the lake. Warm croissants, fresh fruit, a coffee that smelled like heaven. I watched the boats move gently across the water and thought, this is what it feels like to breathe again. At noon, I met with the Swiss financial advisor, Herr Meyer, who guided me through the process of securing my long-term residency. He explained everything with patience and respect, two things I had forgotten were possible when dealing with people. "Your assets are stable, Mrs. Johnson," he said warmly. "You can live here comfortably for the rest of your life." For a moment, I just stared at him. Comfortably. It was a luxury I had never allowed myself. After signing several documents, Herr Meyer asked gently, "Are you sure you want to make this permanent?" I replied, "I'm not more sure of anything." As I walked out of the building, a quiet triumph bloomed inside me, the kind that grows not from revenge, but from reclaiming a life you didn't realize you were allowed to live. But right when peace settled again, a new storm arrived. An unknown number flashed across my phone. I hesitated, then answered. "Mrs. Johnson?" a woman asked, her voice crisp and professional. "This is Sarah Williams from Family Services in your hometown." My stomach tightened. "Miss Williams," I replied calmly, "I assure you I am mentally stable, financially secure, and living by choice. Your daughter's claims are false." "We still need to verify through an official evaluation. Would you be willing to undergo a medical and psychological assessment through the U.S. consulate in Zurich?" "Absolutely," I said without hesitation. "Schedule it." After I hung up, I sat very still, not shaken, just stunned that Rebecca had crossed such a line. She wasn't just trying to bring me back anymore. She was trying to legally discredit me. But the part of me that once trembled under her control wasn't trembling anymore. That same day, I called my lawyer, Anil. He sighed deeply when he heard the story. "Julietta, your daughter is now attempting legal manipulation. She's desperate." "File whatever needs to be filed," I told him firmly, "including a defamation case if necessary." "You have every right," he said. "She has gone too far." 2 days later, I stood in the U.S. consulate in Zurich undergoing a full medical and psychological evaluation, 3 hours of tests, interviews, and assessments. When it was over, the American doctor removed his glasses and looked at me with warm respect. "Mrs. Johnson," he said gently, "not only are you mentally sound, you demonstrate exceptional clarity and decisiveness. Your daughter's claims will be marked as unfounded." Relief washed over me, not because I feared the results, but because I knew I would finally have official proof that Rebecca's desperation had crossed into dangerous territory. Family Services closed the case. Rebecca was notified that her claims were false and documented. That night, something inside me settled, like the last piece of a broken puzzle finally finding its place. Later, as I sat by the window of my new home, watching night fall softly over Zurich, I realized something profound. The world I had been running from was gone, and the world I was running toward had finally opened its doors. But deep down, I knew Rebecca wasn't finished yet, not by a long shot.
From the moment the psychological evaluation confirmed my clarity, something inside me shifted. It felt as though a heavy curtain had finally been lifted from my life, exposing a truth I had spent decades refusing to see, that I had been living for a daughter who never once lived for me. As I stepped out of the U.S. consulate and into the crisp Zurich air, I inhaled deeply, letting the cold bite my lungs. It felt like freedom. It felt like reclaiming the years I had surrendered to Rebecca without ever realizing the cost. That evening, I returned to my cozy apartment overlooking the lake, poured myself a cup of warm tea, and stared at the still water reflecting the city lights. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I wasn't thinking of anyone's needs but my own. Not Rebecca's, not David's, not the twins, just mine. But peace, I had learned, often comes with echoes, and some echoes refuse to fade easily. As I picked up my phone, I hesitated. I had dozens of unread messages, but I had learned long ago that not every message deserves to be opened. Still, curiosity nudged me. I unlocked my phone. And there it was. Another flood of messages from Rebecca. "Mon, please answer. We're drowning. We can't pay the mortgage without your help." The bank called again. "Please, just talk to me." There was no apology, no accountability, just desperation wrapped in entitlement. Exactly what I had lived through for decades. I placed the phone face down on the table, unwilling to let her panic steal another moment of my peace. I had spent my entire life rescuing her from the consequences of her choices. And now, for the first time, life was teaching her a lesson I never could. The next morning, I met Herr Meyer to finalize my residency documents. His professionalism and warmth made the process feel effortless, like stepping into a new chapter with someone holding the door open for me. Mrs. Johnson, he said kindly, Switzerland will treat you well. You've made wise decisions. I smiled, a real smile, one that reached my eyes. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I replied, my decisions are for me. As I walked home through the bustling Zurich streets, the cold breeze brushing against my cheeks, I felt an unfamiliar confidence blooming inside me. I bought myself a bouquet of fresh roses, something I hadn't done in years, not because anyone else needed them, just because I deserved them. But life often brings validation when you least expect it. Later that afternoon, my neighbor in Zurich, a kind woman named Ingrid, invited me to join a hiking group of retirees. I hesitated at first. I wasn't used to accepting invitations that didn't involve babysitting or emergency errands, but something told me to say yes. As we hiked through the breathtaking Swiss countryside, Ingrid asked, "What brought you to Switzerland, Julieta?" I looked at the snowy mountains in the distance and answered simply, "Freedom." She nodded knowingly. Many of us came here for the same reason, to escape the emotional burdens of families who never learned how to love us without using us. Her words sank into me like warm sunlight. For the first time in my life, I felt understood without needing to explain myself. Back in my apartment that evening, I turned on my phone only to discover more missed calls, 32 to be exact, and 15 new messages. But this time, one message stopped me cold. It wasn't from Rebecca. It was from David. "Julieta," the message said, "please hear me out. I know Rebecca hurt you deeply. I know she crossed a line none of us can ever justify. But please believe me. I always saw how much you sacrificed. I always knew you carried this family. I never had the courage to speak up because I felt trapped too. I just want you to know I'm sorry, truly." I read the message twice, then a third time. It didn't change anything. The damage was irreversible. But for the first time in years, someone in that family acknowledged my pain. A warmth flickered in my chest, small but meaningful. Over the next few days, I joined more group activities, art classes, book clubs, lake walks, and slowly, beautifully, my life began to bloom again. These people weren't asking me for anything. They weren't demanding money, time, or emotional energy. They simply welcomed me. And then came an unexpected email from a blog editor who had read my letter about emotional abuse and aging. She wanted to feature my story. At first, I hesitated, but then I thought of all the women like me, women who had given their whole lives to ungrateful children. If my pain could help even one of them reclaim their dignity, then it would be worth sharing. I agreed. 2 weeks later, the interview went live on YouTube and it spread like wildfire. Stories began pouring in from women around the world. My children only call when they need money. My daughter hasn't visited me in years, but she expects me to watch her baby. I thought being used was a normal part of motherhood. Your story saved me. Hundreds of comments, thousands of messages, a global chorus of women who had suffered in silence, just like I did. Then came the message that struck me the hardest. A long email from Andrea, a young woman I had never met. "Mrs. Johnson, your story changed my life. I realized I was becoming exactly like Rebecca, entitled, demanding, blind to my mother's sacrifices. Your story stopped me from repeating the same cycle. Yesterday, I apologized to my mother for the first time in years. Thank you for saving our relationship." I cried. Not out of sadness, but because my pain had finally created something healing. Weeks passed. My peace grew stronger. My new life expanded beautifully. German classes, dinners with new friends, quiet mornings by the lake. For once, my days belonged to me. But just when I believed the past had finally loosened its grip, a call came from Elvira back home. Her voice trembled slightly, charged with importance. "Julieta, you need to hear this. Rebecca, she lost the house. For a moment, the room spun, not because I pitied Rebecca, but because the consequences had finally landed. The house I financed, the mortgage I carried, the safety net I had held together alone for decades, gone. What happened? I asked quietly. The bank foreclosed. They couldn't keep up with payments. They're moving to a small apartment across town. And Rebecca asked if you knew how to contact you. She said she wants to apologize. My heart didn't jump. It didn't break. It simply stayed still. Did you tell her anything? I asked. Yes. She said, some wounds never heal, and that you are gone for good. I closed my eyes, letting the weight of those words settle over me. Gone for good. It wasn't revenge. It was survival. And deep down, I knew the biggest storm was still coming. Because Rebecca wasn't someone who gave up easily. And she wasn't done with me yet.
There is a strange silence that comes with closing chapters. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of freedom. By the time Elvira told me that Rebecca had lost the house, something inside me shifted forever. It wasn't joy. It wasn't revenge. It was closure. The universe had simply handed my daughter the consequences she had spent decades running from. That evening, I sat on my balcony overlooking the Swiss mountains, wrapped in a soft wool blanket, watching the sky fade into shades of lavender and deep blue. The peace was almost unreal. I had lived 75 years, most of them in service to a child who called my love a burden. And now, I was finally living for myself. But life wasn't done surprising me. The next morning, my phone rang, an international number I didn't recognize. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but something, intuition, curiosity, made me answer. Mrs. Johnson, a woman's voice asked. Yes, who is this? My name is Bkhayjit, she said with warm excitement. I'm an editor with a Swiss publishing house. We read the story you shared online, and we believe it deserves to become a book. A book? The thought alone sent a tremor through me. You mean a real book? I asked. A real book, she replied. One that could help thousands of women trapped in emotional abuse by their adult children. Your voice is powerful, Giulietta, and women need to hear it. For the first time in years, I felt something blooming inside me that I hadn't felt since my youth. Purpose. I spent the next 3 months writing the raw truth of everything I had survived. Not just the story of Rebecca, but the lessons buried inside decades of sacrifice. How mothers lose themselves trying to be everything. How love without boundaries becomes a cage. How silence becomes a weapon used against us. And how reclaiming your life after 70 isn't impossible. It's necessary. I titled the book, When Love Hurts, Reclaiming Yourself After Family Betrayal. Writing it was like stitching myself back together word by word. By the time the book released, I had no idea what to expect, but what happened next was beyond my imagination. It became a bestseller. Not because it was sensational, but because it was true. Women wrote to me from Spain, Mexico, Argentina, India, Brazil, South Africa, Canada, everywhere, sharing stories heartbreakingly similar to mine. My daughter uses me for money and screams when I say no. My 40-year-old son still expects me to finance his life. I thought I was alone. You saved me. You gave me courage. You helped me see that love without respect is not love.
Every message stitched another piece of my heart back into place. But one letter arrived that I will never forget. A handwritten envelope stamped from my old hometown. When I opened it, my hands trembled. It was from my grandchildren. Their handwriting was clumsy and uneven, but sincere. Dear Grandma Giulietta, Dad told us the truth. We know Mom said very bad things to you. We want you to know we miss you, we love you, and we are proud of you for being so brave. They drew a small picture of me standing on a mountain surrounded by little hearts. For years, I had carried guilt, the guilt of leaving them behind, the guilt of choosing myself. But in that moment, every ounce of guilt dissolved because they understood, because the truth had reached them without my voice ever speaking it. I wrote back immediately, my tears staining the paper. My dear grandchildren, someday when you are grown, I hope you understand that love must never destroy who you are. My doors and my heart will always be open to you when you're ready. With all my love, Grandma Giulietta. As the seasons passed, Zurich felt more like home. My circle of friends grew. I spent mornings at lakeside cafes, afternoons in German classes, evenings painting or writing or walking through quiet cobblestone streets. And the most beautiful part? No one needed anything from me. No one demanded. No one drained me. I was simply allowed to exist whole, respected, free. But life had one final twist in store for me. 6 months after my book became a bestseller, I received a message from David. He wrote with humility, acknowledging his own failures, expressing genuine remorse for the years he stood silent next to Rebecca's cruelty. He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for help. He simply said, "You deserved better. Thank you for everything you did for our family." I replied with grace, not bitterness, because forgiveness isn't for the other person. It's for the peace we choose. Days became months, months became years, and slowly, beautifully, I became the woman I had forgotten I could be. I lived by the lake. I traveled through Europe. I spent birthdays hiking mountains instead of crying over rejection. I made friends who cared about me without needing anything in return. I grew my savings. I built a legacy of truth, strength, and dignity.